Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for
It's
allowing
so
me.
nice seeing your face.
Same here. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm a fan of your platform and a fan of yours.
That's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
You're
I'm a
welcome.
fan of your platform. Okay, well, for those of you who don't know who you are, which I'm sure like they already do, but please introduce us to yourself.
My name is Mike Payne. I am the host of the Ethically Immoral Podcast. I host a podcast that hosts up and coming spoken word artists, poets, authors, just different creatives. Um, Been at it since May. It's when this version of the podcast started. Airs every Sunday night, 6:30 p.m. or after 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So it's essentially it from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Basically it.
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, yes.
Oh my God, what's Wisconsin like?
Uh, it's not bad actually. It's a lot better than what people think. Winters aren't the best. Um, Thankfully, climate change has has it made the
What?
winters. Yeah, winters aren't so bad anymore. They're bad, but they're not as bad as they were. So, but it's not bad. A lot of things to do here in the summertime if you have an open mind. So,
So where did you even get the idea to start this podcast?
so I had a podcast back in 2007. Had a pod. So let me back up a little bit. So I had a website back in 2005, early 2006. Same concept as the podcast that I have now. We housed poets, spoken word artists, and we had a platform where we could all get together, post our work, comment on each other's um, poetry or whatever it was that we posted. Decided at some point to have a radio show. And so 2007 started, was the TML radio show, the Mecca Lounge radio show that lasted about 5 years or so. Took some time away, wanted to get back into it. And it was about 10-year difference, 10-year gap. And yeah, I always wanted to get back into it. Always made excuses not to do it. Then COVID hit, stuck in the house, couldn't make any more excuses because I was at home. And so I was like, if I'm going to do this, go and get it done. So that's what happened.
That's so creative. Where did you get the idea of the name, Ethically Immoral?
So honestly, it was just a play on words. I had a blog that I started a few years ago, and I wanted to come up with a creative name for that. So I came up with Ethically Immoral. Um, when I started the podcast, or while I was in the planning stages of that, I wanted to come up with a name. I couldn't think of one. Everything that I thought of was already taken, and then I just went to default, Ethically Immoral, and it's a catchy, unique name, and wanted to stand out some. So that's where that came from.
Oh, okay. It is definitely very unique.
Yeah.
So since you've been doing this for math, like 15 years now, yeah?
Well, there was like a 10-year break. So I guess a total maybe. So we started in May of 2020. So maybe about 5.5 years, something like that total with the old podcast and this one. Yeah. So
Because you know a lot of artists. How do I'm sure you've known them from before, but other than that, how do you vet them to make sure that they're legit?
so yeah, back in the day, so back in 2007, podcasts really weren't a thing, right? So it was relatively new. And that's when MySpace was popular. And there were a lot of, yeah, I know, right? I know, so it's my age. But there were a lot of uh, poets and spoken word artists that were on MySpace. And the thing is that there weren't a lot of platforms, like online platforms. And this is what I noticed. There weren't a lot of online platforms for poets and spoken word artists to really go to. There really wasn't anything on television at the time. That Poetry Jam or That Poetry was the thing back in the day, but really nothing else. And so I found that when I started that podcast back in 2007, there was a need for that. There were poets and spoken word artists who wanted to get their names out there, who didn't have the Deaf Poet platform to go to. So there were these hungry up and coming artists that wanted a way to get their work out. And so that's what our platform provided. And so when I started this particular podcast, there were a lot of people that I knew. In fact, when I started, those were some of the people that I relied on. Some of my old relationships that I had with poets who were still doing their thing. But I noticed during the pandemic, well, we're still in it, but during the pandemic, it was the same thing. But this time, everyone moved to Instagram. And before this, I really was out of the loop when it came to the poetry community. And when I joined Instagram just to start to get the name of the podcast out there for everyone, I noticed that there were these, just like before, there was this group of poets and spoken word artists who didn't have that platform. There really wasn't a lot of platforms even now for that. And so I figured there was still a need. I felt there was still a need for that. And so it's just reaching out and going on YouTube or visiting profiles and seeing that, people are putting albums out or videos out, or they're writing books, but they don't have that avenue, that platform to get their voice out there. So building relationships, cultivating relationships, a lot of networking. That's basically how I, quote unquote, vet the guests that I have, the creatives that I have on. So it's pretty cool. And then word of mouth too, because now I really don't have to reach out to really anybody anymore. I get inquiries all the time. And so when there's specific people that I might want to target to bring on, or if I'm put on by someone else, like, hey, you need to check this person out, that's typically when I'll reach out to people. So it's pretty cool.
Why do you call them chapters and not episodes?
Because, well, one, everyone calls their podcast episode, their installments episodes. But just from a creative perspective, I like to read, right? And a lot of the creatives that I have on write books. And so I figured that was a different way, again, to be different, but to keep it relevant to what it is that I'm doing, just to put up that type of vibe, that type of aura out there. So that's a good catch. That was a good catch. Yeah, I call them chapters. Yeah.
Speaking of the fact that you like to read, so you're really into philosophy?
I like philosophy. I do. Yeah, I like philosophy. I like to think.
Who's your favorite philosopher? If you could pick one or two.
You know what? I don't know if I have a favorite philosopher. I mean, I can always go to the traditional ones that we all know, but I really don't have one. I just like the idea. I like the mind of philosophers. I like the way that they think, regardless of what their position is, the ability to always have an open mind, even if it challenges your own way of thinking, to have intelligent conversations about meaningful things with different people, again, while having um, differences of opinion, but at the same time being open-minded to learn and to adjust if you need to adjust, not necessarily to make it fit your argument, but to grow and to get better as a person. And so just the idea of having an open mind and discussing things that ultimately matter to, well, to whoever it is that you're talking to really interests me. So I really don't have a favorite philosopher or a set of philosophers, but I am intrigued by philosophy itself and the
Yeah.
concept behind it.
All right. Cool. What's Ink Magazine?
Oh, the E magazine is actually a magazine started by one of my friends, God's Ink of Spoken Word. Make sure y'all check him out at the Ink Magazine on Instagram. So the Ink Magazine is a magazine that he puts out monthly that focuses on creatives, poets and spoken word artists. He um, he features different spoken word venues around the country. He has a um, he has what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I'll just go to feature where he interviewed quote unquote uh, dead poets, and just brings what they would, what at least what he or whoever is writing the interview, trying to make them relevant now. What would their opinions and their views be on what's happening today? It's a really cool feature.
That's so cool.
But yeah, so the E Magazine, yeah, is started by God's English Spoken Word. He also has a podcast himself, the Words I Never Said podcast, which airs on Wednesdays on all podcast platforms. So I'm sure y'all check him out. And if he's watching, he owes me a check for plugging his.
What's this cover contest that he's doing?
So the cover contest, if I understand correctly, is this March, I believe, would be the 1 year anniversary of his magazine. And so for that, he wants to feature or put on the cover readers or listeners of the podcast or a listener of the podcast. And so he's having a contest where they upload a video, I believe it's 1 minute or less, and people vote. So the listeners of the podcast or fans of the magazine vote on the pieces. And I don't know how many rounds it is or how long it goes through or how often it rotates. I think it's 3 days. So a video will stay up and then you put another one up. And then I think whoever gets the most votes at the end would then be on the cover of the March edition of this magazine.
That's such a creative idea. I like that a lot.
Yeah, he's a real cool guy. I've actually known him. I've known him for about 15 or 16 years because he was part of the website that I had back in the day. He was a writer then, and we just been cool. I mean, we hadn't been in contact consistently over these years, but yeah, he's a really cool guy. You should think about inviting him on.
I'm still gonna reach out to him. We have another mutual friend though.
We do.
Pop.
P.O.P. Walter Matthews. That's right.
How do you know him?
Again, so I met Walter or Pop in the summer of 2005. We were in the same poetry group together. So I started writing in 2003 and poetry in 2003. I finally went online with my writing in 2005, in the summer of 2005. And I went to a website, I think it was called High Five, I think it was the name of the website, and they had different poetry groups. So I joined one, African American poetry, and he was one of the members, and we really hit it off right away, seemingly. And so over the years, so when I moved to my own site, a lot of people from the group came over. Pop was one of them. And when I started the podcast, he was he's still a producer, but he was producing poets at the time and their albums. And so he would often come on with whomever it was that he was promoting at the time. And I mean, we've written together, we've done collab pieces together, and I'm really proud of him. But yeah, and yeah, he was on the podcast about a month or so ago, maybe a little bit more than that. Yeah. So
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
yeah, did you get a chance to listen to that?
Of course.
You did. Yeah. Yeah, it was really good. I love Pop. What's up, Mo?
Why do you think it's important to document our experiences in life?
Hmm. I don't know if it's as important for us, those who are experiencing it, but I think for those who may come later, so maybe family members of ours, maybe our children, I think it's good to have a record, though, of our experiences, um, whether it's journaling or even poetry. Like, so for me, so let me backtrack then, because actually that's a good question. So with poetry, for me, it was a way of releasing, right? And so um, being able to document my experiences in a way that helps me get out what I need to get out is therapeutic. And so even if it's not necessarily exactly the situation that I was in, but more of the emotions that I felt at that particular point in time. You know, really the experiences themselves is the surface. It's the emotions and the way that we feel is really the substance of what it is that I would like to document. So how was I feeling at the particular point in time? How did I
Yeah.
react during that period? And sometimes, depending on what it is I want to express, what what did I do to feel better, to move on from that? So from a creative standpoint, whether it's poetry or whether it's, if you're writing a book or whatever, I think, well, maybe a book is a little bit different because you're actually telling a story. But when it comes to poetry anyway, I think it's important because it's therapeutic. And I think expressing yourself in a way that um, is creative is therapeutic. So I think it's important from that perspective. But as far as like a storytelling, like, hey, this is what happened, um, I think that may not necessarily be as important unless you're writing, let's say, a journal and you're documenting what happened, and then you can see a progressive, hopefully, improvement
Yeah.
in moving from one place here to another place here, if that makes sense. I
That
saw
makes
the,
perfect sense.
that's okay. That's one of those, okay.
No, yeah. No, I feel like no, like I'm using this for selfish reasons, what you just said.
Right. Yeah. 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 But yeah. So that's why I think that's why I think documenting it is important. It from again from a creative perspective.
Hmm, that was really powerful. Do you think the problems of society are ruined? Do you think the problems of society are ruined or spoiled by a few bad apples?
The problems of society are ruined
Or
um
spoiled by a few bad apples? You said a few bad apples specifically.
um or are you referring to, oh, okay, so that was I think that was a Twitter, man, you're everywhere. You know what, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Well, no, the saying, okay, so with that, and put that in context. So the saying is that a few bad apples spoil the whole bunch. So when I wrote that, it was more in relation to um, this summer and police brutality. So the whole George Floyd narrative, right? And the things that you would hear all the time about the police, well, there are a few bad apples. There are only a few bad apples. And my response then is, well, okay, well, you're saying don't blame everybody. It's just a few bad apples. But if the saying is a few bad apples spoil the whole bunch, that's probably not the that's probably not what you want to go with if you're trying to separate yourself from everyone else. So that was written in that context.
Wow. I didn't even think about that. You give me a lot to think about. I'm not gonna be able to sleep. Okay. So like you're very serious. What do you like to do for fun?
I can't be.
What do you like to do for fun?
I love. I love.
Don't say write poetry or
No,
podcast.
no.
Don't say that.
No. So I love sports.
Oh.
Yeah, I love sports. So whether that's
Who's your team?
it was
Green Bay?
no, the blasphemy. That's blasphemous. I hope they lose on
What?
whatever they play, Saturday or Sunday. Go Bucks.
No, are you really a Bucks fan?
Well,
I never run into Bucks fans.
so I am a fan. Well, I like Tampa Bay. I do like their team. I liked it when Jameis Winston was there. Unfortunately,
I'm not going to talk about him.
he threw a lot of interceptions, but no, it's more of me not being. It's more of me disliking the Packers. So yeah, the Packers is the home team. Well, they're in Green Bay. My favorite football team is Denver. My favorite basketball team, Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
Favorite NFL team is the Broncos. My NBA team is the Utah Jazz. Baseball team is the Atlanta Braves. And when I used to like hockey with the Colorado Avalanche. Go Noles, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, go Noles.
That fellow alumni right there.
That's right.
I think he played with Jameis. Did you play with Jameis? I don't know. I think he might have played with Jameis.
Yeah.
But
I am a Noles fan. It was wrong what they did to Bobby Bowden, but I'm moving past that. But
he had to retire.
Huh?
He could barely walk. He had to retire.
Well, if you want to call it retiring, let's say they helped him out the door. So no, I play sports. I have an 8-year-old daughter, so we do a lot of different things, a lot of creative projects. I enjoy music, so I like live music. I love live music. It's unfortunate that COVID hit because I couldn't go out and I couldn't enjoy live music. In Milwaukee, we have a lot of festivals here in the summertime. And so all of that, of course, was canceled due to COVID. What else do I like to do for fun? I like to get together with friends and just laugh and talk and joke. I can have fun.
Okay, so as a podcaster, can you specifically tell us technical things that you do in order to make your podcast successful? Like, is there a certain app that you use to clean, make the sound crisp, or is there a certain app that you use to upload it for someone who wants to start a podcast?
Now it's not necessary to have a lot of equipment. But I use, I have a mic. I have, podcasting equipment. So that is really, as far as sound quality is concerned, that's what it's really about. Really, it's the hardware that you have. I mean, um, there are sites that you can go to that will balance out the sound. So if you've ever heard the podcast, whoever's listening or watching, I'll play spoken word performances, recorded spoken word performances at the beginning of the podcast and towards the end of the podcast. Well, sometimes the volume is different.
Yeah.
And then when I'm talking to or having a conversation with the creative, the sounds are different. So there are sites out there that you can go to that will balance that out for you. It'll mix it so it sounds the sound is consistent. I can get you. I don't know if you want to share it, but I can get that information for you. What I use,
Okay.
but yeah, so equipment is cool. But again, like I said, now you really don't need it when you have podcast hosts like Anchor who allows you to record your podcast through your phone, right? So the hardware isn't absolutely necessary anymore, but yeah, it's good to um, study as far as like and do your research as far as like what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, if you're going for quality, of course, yes, but then sound quality, um, equipment, and then just look for these different sites that'll help, whether it's host the podcast or, like I said, balance everything out because that's what people listen for is the quality of the sound. So.
Yeah. Word. Word. Where did you get your voice from?
My dad actually, I think.
Oh, is that your dad who just commented?
No. Oh no, that wasn't. Um, I don't know. I can't see who commented, but no. So my dad, he did radio in Detroit and in North Carolina, and for a long time he had been trying to get me to get into radio, but I
Oh.
always resisted. And so practice too. So it's like to speak using your diaphragm and practicing voice tones and and things like that. It's a lot of practice well, maybe not a lot of practice, but ultimately my dad gave me my voice, I suppose I could say. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, where can we like you, stalk you, follow you, all that fun stuff?
So again, hit me up here on Instagram at Ethically Immoral. On Twitter, at the Mecca Lounge, MECCALOUNGE. You can find us on Facebook at Ethically Immoral Podcast. Oh, William Washington, he was a guest. What's up, sir? And my personal Instagram is at MacMaster_Mike.
And then final question, because I think that I very rarely get a chance to talk about philosophy with anyone. And with these next 24 hours, who knows what's going to happen? And everyone's like on the edge of their seat, extremely anxious. And I would like for you to answer the question, what's the point in being happy now if you're going to be sad later?
Well, I think if you already decide you're going to be sad later, then you're going to be sad later. You've already predicted that's what's going to happen. And so I think without sadness, there is no happiness. Because what are you comparing it to? And vice versa. I mean, without, you know, well, vice versa. But I think I won't say the purpose of being happy. I don't know if um I don't know if happiness is I think the purpose of being happy um is to experience the polar opposite of 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 sadness or that despair that you feel, because happiness and sadness are adjectives, right? So it's just it just describes the way that you feel. And happiness isn't necessarily one particular emotion. It's like love. Love just describes the different emotions that you feel. It's all together.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think as human beings, we need that balance. But I think to, as a person, to say that we're going to be sad later, you just are opening that door. You're speaking it into existence if you are a
Yeah.
believer in the universe. It's a yin and a yang, but happiness and sadness, they're needed. They're absolutely needed because without one, there wouldn't be the other. And I think that as human beings, as people, we should embrace both because we can grow from both. I see. I am poet 33 is saying or wrote that happiness is a
Mindset.
is a mindset. Um, Possibly. I mean, because happiness is um, relative, what we call happiness, but happiness is ultimately again a group of feelings, and we can describe it however we're going to describe it or call it whatever we're going to call it. But I think they're needed. Both are needed in order to have a balance, right? Because I don't know if I want to be happy in all of the time. It's like living in Hawaii, right? Like I live in Wisconsin where it's cold in the winter and sometimes it can be very, very hot in the summer. You're living in Hawaii, people, that's paradise for everyone else. But for people who live there, who were born there, Hawaii is just Hawaii. They want to know what it's like here in Milwaukee because they've never experienced snow before. They've never experienced cold before, right? So they they don't know anything else. And I don't know if that's healthy. I don't know if that's healthy.
Wow. You're very smart.
Allegedly.
Because I know that you on your about me section you said that you very rarely talk about yourself. Why don't you talk more about yourself on your podcast?
Uh, I don't know. Because so the podcast is I want other people to shine, right? So your platform, and this is one of the things that I love about your platform because you bring so many different creative people here to discuss a wide variety of things, right? And you typically stay out of the way. You ask your questions and you back off because you created this platform for other people uh, to get exposure. And if you're anything like me, you are inspired by creative people. You're inspired by creativity. Um, One of the things that I love about the podcast that I host is that I get to talk to all of these different people, all of these people who are much more smarter than me, who are much more creative than I am. And I'm a fan. I'm here talking to these different people, some I had never heard of before, but they are just as important to me as people who are on television or who are poetry slam champions, right? And so for me, I just want to stand out of the way and just allow these people to shine and to soak in as much of their energy as I can. And then when I'm done, I can listen to it or I can reflect on it and say, okay, what can I do to get better from that? What can I do to grow as a person? And I get to do it every week. And that's amazing to me. So that's why, because for me, as a creative, and poets out there will get this, um, we don't like to talk about ourselves. A lot of us don't.
You
We don't
guys
like to
don't.
talk about ourselves because we feel as though we aren't important. It's just like, it's just us. Or when we get compliments, we tend to shoo them away, like, oh, thank you. But we tend to shoo them away, right? And so for me, even though I get asked a lot that question, well, why don't you show more of who you are, let people know about who you are? For me, it's like no one cares. Now, I know that may not necessarily, rationally, I know that might necessarily be true, but just from a feeling perspective, I don't feel that way. My podcast is for people to come on and for them to shine. And that's what I want them to do.
That's so selfless.
And
Thank you so much for this, Mike. This was the affirmation that I needed. That
I'm glad.
keep going.
I'm glad. I'm glad. And like I said, I love your platform, and I don't know your complete story, but I know enough. And what I admire about you, um, and what I hope to eventually get to the point where I am like you, is you aren't afraid to reveal who you are to people. It feels as though you conquer vulnerability, right? Um, I see the videos that you post in where you are posting bloopers where you might mess up or where you get frustrated, um, or whether you're parading around in whatever it is you're parading around in, you're at the gym, you aren't afraid to show, when you're axe throwing, where you're not successful. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that publicly. And I I reject vulnerability because I don't like that feeling. And um, I don't like, I don't even like the idea of the willingness to embrace vulnerability, right? And
And that's not
so,
bad. That's not a bad thing.
right, yeah, I just haven't gotten to that place yet.
Yeah.
And so that's what I love when I said I'm a fan of yours, because at some point, and I'm working to get there, I want to get to where you are, and you've grown so much from where you started. So kudos to you, congrats to you. Again, I love the platform, and I'm so glad that you have this for all of the creative people that you bring on, and how you share yourself, how you're so revealing and so open to people. People need that. So continue to do what it is that you do, because there are a lot of people that are watching.
Thank you.
You
Thank
got
you,
it.
Mike. And I appreciate you for providing a nice platform for poets, creatives everywhere. Because, man, what a time to be alive. Uh, I know that we're supposed to be sad, but it really is a blessing to be able to see 2021. I still keep saying 2020.
Well, yeah.
I appreciate you and your existence. Keep being wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.